जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी,
राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी।
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी,
जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी।
जय गोपी जन वल्लभा, जय गिरिवर धारी, जय गिरिवर धारी।
जय गोपी जन वल्लभा, जय गिरिवर धारी, जय गिरिवर
नंदना, जय प्रज जन रंजना,
जय यशोदानंदना, जय प्रज जन रंजना,
जय यशोदा नंदना, जय प्रज जन रंजना,
जय यशोदानंदना, जय व्रजन रंजना।
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी,
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी,
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी,
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी,
जय यमुना तीरवनचारी, जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय राधा माधव, जय कुंज बिहारी,
जय राधा माधव, जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय राधा माधव, जय कुंज बिहारी,
जय राधा माधव, जय कुंज बिहारी।
जय श्री श्री राधानी माधव की
जय।
जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रमयी की जय, श्री श्री लड्डू गोपाल जी की जय, श्री श्री गौर निताई की, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की, श्रीला गुरुदेव की, अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam namaskritya
Naram
chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam Tato jayamudiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Naishtiki. My regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee. All that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed in loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. So we welcome all devotees today morning to read and study Bhagavatam. We'll look at a nice verse from the first canto, 18th chapter, verse 24 and 25. First canto, 18th chapter, 24 and 25. Ekada dhanur udyamya Vicharan mrigayan bane Mrigan anugata shrantaha Shuditas trishito brisham Jalasayam achakshanaha Ravivesha tamashramam Dadarsha muni masina Shantam milita lochanam Ekada dhanurudyamya Vicharan mrigayam vane Mrigan anugata shrantaha Shuditas trishito brisham Jalasayam achakshanaha Ravivesha tamashramam Dadarsha muni mashina Shantam milita lochanam Ekada dhanurudyamya Vicharan mrigayam vane Mrigan anugata shrantaha Shuditas trishito brisham Jalasayam achakshanaha Ravivesha tamashramam Dadarsha munimasinam Shantam milita lochanam. Would anyone like to chant?
Ekada dhanurudyamya Vicharan mrigayam vane Mrigan anugata shantaha Shuddhistas स्पृशितो वृषम्
शुचितस्पृशितो वृषम्
जलाशयम् अचक्षानः परिवेशातमाश्रमम् ददर्शामुनिमासीनम् शान्तम् मीलितलोचनम्
एकदा धनुरुद्यम्य विचरन् मृगयां वने मृगान् अनुगतः श्रान्तः शुद्धश्रितो वृषम् जलाशयन् अचलासनः प्रवेक्ष तम् आश्रमम् ददर्श मुनिम् आत्मन् शान्तं मिलितलोचनम्
Mataji's.
एकदा धनुरुद्यम्य विचरन् मृगयां वने मृगान् अनुगतः श्रान्तः शुद्धितस्तृषितो वृषम् जलाशयम् अचक्षानः प्रविवेशातमाश्रमम् ददर्शामुनिमासीनम् शान्तम् मीलितलोचनम्
एकदा धनुरुद्यम्य विचरन् मृगयां वने मृगाननुगतः शान्तः शुद्धितस्तृषितो वृषम् जलाशयम् अचक्षानः प्रविवेशातमाश्रमम् ददर्शामुनिमासीनम् शान्तम् मीलितलोचनम्
Ekada. Once upon a time. Dhanuhu. Arrows and bow. Udyamya. Taking firmly. Vicharan. Following. Mrigayam. Hunting excursion. Vane. In the forest. Mrigan. Stags. Anugataha. While following. Shrantaha. Fatigued. Shuddhitaha. Hungry. Trishitaha. Being thirsty. Vrisham. Extremely. Jala ashayam. Reservoir of water. Achakshanaha. While searching for. Pravivesha. Entered into. Tam. That famous. Ashramam. Hermitage of Shamika Rishi. Dadarsha. Saw. Munim. The sage. Ashinam. Seated. Shantam. All silent. Nilita. Closed. Lochanam. Eyes. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Please repeat the translation. Once upon a time, Maharaj Parikshit, while engaged in hunting in the forest with bow and arrows, became extremely fatigued, hungry and thirsty, while following the stags, while searching for a reservoir of water, he entered the hermitage of the well-known Shamika Rishi and saw the sage sitting silently with closed eyes. Please hear the purport. The Supreme Lord is so kind to His pure devotees that in proper time He calls such devotees up to Him and thus creates an auspicious circumstance for the devotee. Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee of the Lord, and there was no reason for him to become extremely fatigued, hungry and thirsty, because a devotee of the Lord never becomes perturbed by such bodily demands. But by the desire of the Lord, even such a devotee can become apparently fatigued and thirsty just to create a situation favorable for his renunciation of worldly activities. One has to give up all attachment for worldly relations before one is able to go back to Godhead. And thus, when a devotee is too much absorbed in material affairs, the Lord creates a situation to cause indifference. I'll read the sentence again. One has to give up all attachment for worldly relations before one is able to go back to Godhead. And thus, when a devotee is too much absorbed in worldly affairs, the Lord creates a situation to cause indifference. The Supreme Lord never forgets his pure devotee, even though he may be engaged in so-called worldly affairs. Sometimes he creates an awkward situation, and the devotee becomes obliged to renounce all worldly affairs. The devotees can understand by the signal of the Lord, but others take it to be unfavorable and frustrating. Maharaj Parikshit was to become the medium for the revelation of Srimad Bhagavatam by Lord Sri Krishna, as his grandfather Arjuna was the medium for the Bhagavad Gita. Had Arjuna not been taken up with an illusion of family affection by the will of the Lord, the Bhagavad Gita would not have been spoken by the Lord himself for the good of all concerned. Similarly, had Maharaj Parikshit not been fatigued, hungry and thirsty at this time, Srimad Bhagavatam would not have been spoken by Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the prime authority of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, this is a prelude to the circumstances under which Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken for the benefit of all concerned. The prelude, therefore, begins with the words, once upon a time. Jai Shri Prabhupada, transcendental purport. It's amazing purport, isn't it? Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana
Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttapadamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Padvajana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lita Shri Shauramritamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Raptavanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Namo Mahamadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gauri Krishe Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
This one volume Bhagavatam is a test for the eyesight. As as your eyesight starts not working or cooperating, you find that you realize then that how difficult it is without proper eyesight, how many difficulties this material body gives you. And yet I remember Maharaj, Guru Maharaj, reading this right up to the end without glasses. So sometimes you wonder how Krishna provides pure devotees with all the facilities, but struggling devotees, we have to struggle. And this purport is very nice, because this purport actually gives us a lot of encouragement in devotional service, and it's also very instructive. Here you find that this is the verse that actually begins the great episode of Parikshit Maharaj. That's why Prabhupada so nicely states that the verse starts with once upon a time. Unlike material stories, the story of Parikshit Maharaj is factual. It is also extremely helpful in our devotional service. So whenever you use the words once upon a time, normally in the material world, it means a material story. And sometimes it's real, sometimes it's not. But then what is really real in this world also we don't know. And very often that which is real does not last. But whatever that is stated in Bhagavatam, it is eternal. So Parikshit Maharaj begins now his journey for bringing Bhagavatam to us. Parikshit Maharaj was actually a qualified devotee, and Prabhupada makes it very clear in the purport that he is a pure devotee. Sometimes devotees have a mistaken impression that the only pure devotees of Krishna were the gopis or the residents of Vrindavan. But we should also be clear that the entire Bhagavatam is filled with pure devotees. From 1st to 9th canto, many of the devotees who are actually stated there are actually pure devotees. And here it's very clear that Parikshit Maharaj is a pure devotee. So Parikshit Maharaj did not actually need to study Bhagavatam. As Prabhupada writes, Arjuna, there was no need for him to be cast into so-called illusion, because Arjuna was also a pure devotee of the Lord. But this is how sometimes great devotees of the Lord, they take up roles that the Lord wants for them to enact. If they were perfect, then Bhagavatam will be such a perfect scripture that it will never appeal to the imperfect masses, and we comprise of that. So that is why sometimes devotees ask, why is it that in Bhagavatam you find devotees struggling? Why is it that sometimes they are cursed? Why is it that from a human form they become animal form? But the reason is that these devotees themselves have never been affected by the illusory energy of the Lord. We should be very clear about that. But because they are great pure devotees, they are ready to serve the Lord in whatever capacity the Lord deems it fit. That is why Parikshit Maharaj, as Prabhupada writes here, would not ordinarily have been afflicted by hunger, thirst and fatigue. Because in Bhagavatam also it is stated that pure devotees of the Lord, they don't become hungry, thirsty, and even if they do, the bodily demands don't affect them. Unfortunately, for the rest of us, the bodily demands are too much. If this program went on till 10:30, 11 o'clock, we can't take it because prasadam, we're running into eating time. It becomes difficult. Sometimes we think that our bodies are alright, but when no food is there, no drink is there, when we are thirsty, when we are hungry, when we are tired, it's very hard for us to even think straight, what to walk straight. So that is why for a devotee, a pure devotee, Mangalarti is a very glorious affair. But for us, Mangalarti is a big struggle. To wake up in the morning, 4:30, nobody jumps out of bed and say, I'm very happy to wake up for Mangalarti. No. The alarm bell goes into snooze function many times, isn't it? And every time, we off it, we think, okay, fine, let's wait another while, but it never happens. So the truth is, there is a vast difference between pure devotees and struggling devotees. But if pure devotees are not put in difficult situations, then how they tackle the difficult situations will not become examples for us. So we should be very clear, never to offend the pure devotees, not even in our mind. Not even a glance in our mind should come to the thing. See, Parikshit Maharaj was in trouble. No, he was never in trouble. But he was placed in an opportunity where he could remember Krishna for our benefit. So that is why in this verse, every pure devotee has a great role in Krishna's service. And Bhagavatam tells us this role that Krishna gives a pure devotee. I think he has better work, yes. This role that Krishna gives each pure devotee in Bhagavatam and in any other scripture is actually the mercy of Krishna. This is very important. The very fact that a devotee has a role in Krishna consciousness is Krishna's mercy. For us, it's very simple. Every time we have an opportunity to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books, every time we have an opportunity to come together as devotees to hear Bhagavatam, the way Prabhupada has given us this movement, that is actually a direct mercy from the deities. It is a direct mercy from our acharyas. Sometimes we look everywhere and say, where's the mercy? But the mercy is in the process itself. It's there every day for us. But because we take things so much for granted and so quickly for granted, it's so easy for us to discount that there is mercy coming every day. Unfortunately, the rain falls everywhere. But rain that falls on fertile ground, you have nice result of crops growing. But when the rain falls on infertile or barren ground, then you can't blame the rain for the fact that nothing is growing. You can only blame the ground. So in the same way, it is our attitude that actually in which we can obtain the full mercy of Krishna. Because mercy is always available. It's only a question of whether we want to take it or not. So the devotees, they actually assist the Lord. And Krishna displays his kindness for the devotees in such a way, according to time, which is the proper time, and according to creating auspicious circumstances in which the devotee's devotional service has to increase. That is very important. Unfortunately, in the material world, we are very conditioned to think that auspiciousness means everything must be very nice. When we become devotees, we always feel, when I take up devotional service, my wife will be very nice. My children will be perfect children. Their education will go very nicely. All the money will be available for me. All the devotees in my community will be all pure devotees. They will always be serving me. Everything will be very nice. Everywhere I go, prasadam is perfect. My job will be very nice. Nobody can harm me. And that way we build this utopian world in a world which is anything but utopian. And that is where we fail. And that is where we do not realize that that is not auspiciousness according to Krishna. Auspiciousness means in all this nice, beautiful setting, it's very easy to forget Krishna. It's only when you get the slaps of Maya Devi that we wake up and we say, yes, now I need Krishna, I need Krishna. When everything is going splendid and swell, it's very easy for us to go into cruise mode and say, this is nice. And then we expect, Krishna, you have to give me nice wife, nice husband, nice family. Otherwise, why am I taking up Krishna consciousness? It's always transactional. And when a relationship is transactional, we become disappointed and then we forget Krishna. So actually it's not Krishna's fault when things don't go right for us. We also forget that we are not pure devotees. And we have so many karmas that we had in our previous lives. These karmas can go with one stroke of bhakti, provided that stroke is a stroke and it is proper bhakti. Bhaktivinoda Thakur always said that it's possible for a devotee to chant one pure round of Krishna conscious, of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and go back to Godhead. It's possible. But the problem is, we're not chanting that way. So we can't blame the process. We have to look to ourselves. So this point of auspiciousness should not be misunderstood. Parikshit Maharaj's curse that fell on him was actually auspicious. That is what Prabhupada is saying in the purport. Because it created a favorable situation for him to go back to Krishna. And any situation in this material world that creates that favorable situation, even though it appears tragic or it appears wonderful, for a devotee, it's always good. That's why for a devotee, Krishna is all good. And anything that comes to a devotee is always good. This is the mood of a devotee. There's a nice story of Birbal and Akbar. Akbar was a famous emperor, and Birbal was his chief minister. So one time, Akbar was walking down the road, and that day Birbal was not with him. As he walked, he saw on the street a shoemaker. and the shoemaker was making shoe. So Akbar looked at the shoemaker and he was quite fascinated by the way he was making the shoe. He kept looking and looking, and then he banged his face into a pillar. He didn't see it. He got so distracted. So after that his face was bruised, and all the other courtiers came up to him and said, Maharaj, what happened? What is it that caused you this problem? Why did you bang into it? And Akbar very innocently said, well, actually I was seeing the shoemaker, and just by seeing him, I bumped into the pillar. The courtier said, oh, that means the shoemaker is very inauspicious. Just by looking at him, he caused you injury. So Akbar said, yeah, actually we don't want inauspiciousness in our kingdom. What do you think I should do? And they said, very simple, you should just kill him. Hang him tomorrow, because we don't want inauspiciousness. Akbar thought, yeah, that makes sense. We don't want that. So next day, Birbal came back to the court, and he saw the list of those who were going to hang. And at the list, he saw a shoemaker. So he was curious. So he turns to Akbar and says, my dear Lord, can you please tell me what did the shoemaker do, to have such a fate? And he said, oh, you don't know, this one is very inauspicious. Anyone who sees him, they will get, some bruise on the face. So he said, why? What happened? He said, I was walking and I saw him and I bumped into the pillar. So as a king, it is my duty to, get rid of inauspiciousness. And Birbal started laughing. So Akbar said, why are you laughing? He said, oh, I was laughing because I think you've forgotten to put one more person on this list. So Akbar said, who? Is anyone else I've forgotten? He said, yeah, yourself. He said, why should I be put on the hanging list? He said, just think about it, Maharaj. Just you saw this shoemaker and you bumped into the pillar. But the shoemaker just saw you, and today he's going to hang. Who is actually more inauspicious? I think you are definitely more inauspicious. So you should hang. And in that way, this is how in the material world, we don't realize that which appears to be auspicious actually only has material value. It has no spiritual value. So spiritual auspiciousness is very different. And until we change our mindset, a devotee who faces challenges in the material world will always become discouraged instead of becoming encouraged. This is very important. We will face all kinds of challenges, but a devotee with a positive attitude saying, you know what, this is a difficult situation, but it means I have to concentrate more on Krishna. So Krishna, thank you very much. That is a devotee. It's very nice. Yesterday, Mataji, Hedi Mataji was just talking to me and she was telling me about how she wants to be in Mayapur for a year. And I can tell you that's going to be a challenge. But that challenge is going to keep her very grounded in devotional service. And that's the best thing you can do. Take yourself out of an environment which appears so comforting. This is your comfort zone. To go to another place for a year is not easy. But because you have a desire to serve Krishna, Krishna is now creating a favorable situation where you can go and serve Him. But if we go there thinking everything will be fine and dandy, then we will get disappointed. But if we go anywhere and say, I am prepared for whatever Krishna wants to give, because in that difficulty I must remember Him more, then from a level of being an ordinary devotee, a struggling devotee, we actually take up Krishna consciousness in a much more positive way. That should be our mood. And that is why auspiciousness is actually created by Krishna. Which now brings us to the second point in the verse. The entire purport tells us not only of the background to why Parikshit Maharaj is the chosen person, because he's a pure devotee and because he sees the hand of Krishna, but it also tells us the kindness and mercy of the Lord. In Bhagavatam, I think it is the 4th canto, the Pracheta's prayers, 4th canto, 30th chapter, around about maybe 23rd verse or 24th verse. Very nicely the Prachetas sing, about the mercy of Krishna. They say, Namo Vishuddha Sattvaya, Hare Hari Medase, Krishnaya Vasudevaya, Prabhave Sarvatam, Prabhave Sarva Sarvatam. It's a very important verse. The Prachetas, they spent so many years meditating on the Lord, and they were instructed to do so by none other than Narada Muni. And because they followed the instructions of a pure devotee so nicely, even though they were in so much austerity and difficult situations, still they persevered. And they spent 1,000 years in meditation. It was not easy. One person doing Krishna consciousness is alright. Three people come together, well, you may get along, may not. If you have so many, I think the Prachetas numbered in the hundreds, even the thousands. They were all together, united in their prayer to Krishna. That's a dream today. Unity in Krishna consciousness is very difficult because our mood is always to be different. So it's very hard for us to work together. But because the Prachetas only put Krishna in the center, it was very easy for them. They were united. And so their prayers actually attracted Krishna, and he appeared before them. So now they pray in that verse. They say, Krishna, you are above the material modes of nature. This is the greatness of Krishna. That because he is above the material modes of nature, he can also take us above that. So then they say, Hare, Hari may the say. Hare, Hari may the say means that day and night you are just thinking. The word Hari means to try and remove the miseries. Hare means that he's thinking all the time how to relieve the distress. Medasa. Meda means actually someone who is thinking. But in that verse, you find the word brain being used. So Krishna is using his brain all the time, thinking of ways in which he can actually relieve the distress of the living entities and to always save his devotees. So this is the kindness of Krishna. We don't think of Krishna as much as he thinks of us. And that's a fact. 24 hours a day, Krishna is only thinking of devotees. 24 hours a day, what are we thinking of? Maybe a little while we are thinking of Krishna. After that, no, we don't think of Krishna. So that is why Krishna is kinder than we are. We cannot claim to be even more merciful than Krishna. And Krishna not only thinks of us, but he allows the pure devotees to be directed by him as Rishikesha. That's why Parikshit Maharaj may have looked like he was hungry, appeared like he was thirsty, and presented himself as fatigued. But factually speaking, all his senses were always directed towards remembrance of the Lord, because he was also reciprocating with Krishna. That is why Prabhu's, Mataji's, it's very important for us to manage our lifestyle in such a way that we spend maximum time remembering Krishna. Not fault finding, not criticizing, but remembering Krishna. And we can do that by forcing ourselves, literally, to be buried in the pages of Bhagavatam and to be buried in the chanting of the holy name. Somehow or another we have to do that. If we plan our day in such a way that we are absorbed in Krishna, then even if we are at the work or we are back here, we will not have time for anything else. That's why pure devotees like Parikshit Maharaj, he did not have time to curse back Shringi. Shringi cursed him. But when he realized that it was wrong of him to put the garland of the dead snake around Shamika Rishi, when he heard that he was now cursed to die, and when he knew in his heart that his offense was highly disproportionate to the punishment that was coming, he didn't make a big fuss. We would have gone to senior devotees and said, Prabhu, I'm really fed up with him, because he did this, he did that. And in all that, you waste your time, you waste that devotee's time, and everybody is wasting time. Rather than that, look at what Parikshit Maharaj did. He said, why to challenge the curse by Shringi Rishi, by Shringi Brahmana? Why to? After all, this is an opportune moment for me to remember Krishna. Since I've been given notice of my death, and it's very rare for us to be given notice of death, now I can completely just dedicate myself to the lotus feet of Krishna. So a great devotee of the Lord, he is actually in perfect control of his senses, because he is fully under the shelter of Rishikesha. And when you are protected by Krishna, because your senses are under him, from protection comes direction. This is very important. Very important. Always remember, when we submit our senses in the engagement of Krishna consciousness, the senses automatically come under the purview of Krishna, not under us. And the moment they are under Krishna, they will not only be controlled, but they will be directed towards Krishna conscious activities. So we don't have to worry about direction when we come under protection. This is the beauty of coming under the shelter of Krishna. So Parikshit Maharaj, because he saved himself by being perfectly under Krishna, and that is why, generally speaking, he was not disturbed. But because he was directed by Krishna, he now accepted Krishna's will. Krishna's will was he will become hungry, he will become thirsty, he will become fatigued. So if Krishna wants, then Parikshit Maharaj was ready to become that. And that is what he became. Just like Arjuna. Krishna wanted Arjuna to be the perfect instrument for launching the Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna appeared disillusioned. And when he became disillusioned, he showed us that the best way is, if you're disillusioned, you please turn to Krishna. And Parikshit Maharaj, when he was cursed, what did he do? He didn't make a meal out of it. He just increased his devotional service. And that was it. Every devotee in Bhagavatam has consistently done that. When Gajendra was cursed and became from Indradyumna Maharaj to Gajendra, and when he was put in difficulty, what did he do? He fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence, and by the grace of Krishna, he could remember all his prayers from his previous life. See? When Sudama was faced with poverty, and he was instigated by his good wife to go and see Krishna to ask him for something, he went, but he didn't ask anything. He just went there to render devotional service to Krishna. And when he came back, he was alright. So there is not a single devotee in the history of Bhagavatam and Vaishnava culture who has not been directed by Krishna despite being in material difficulty. That's very important. So this is a leaf for us to take from the pages of Bhagavatam. And a devotee like this, the beauty of him is that even though the situation was unfavorable, as Prabhupada explains here, a devotee of the Lord accepts that the situation is created by Krishna. This is very important. Why? Because in Bhagavatam, Krishna is known as the source of all opportunities. He is known as Samanjas. Nanaka prishtam, na chaparameshtam, na sarva bhaumam, na rasadhipatyam, na yoga siddhir apunar bhavam va, samanjasatva virahaya kangshe. In the 6th canto, I think it's the 11th chapter, the last 4 verses are prayers by Vritrasur. Vritrasur again is a great devotee of the Lord, born in the guise and body of a demon, but in previous life he was Chitraketu Maharaj. And here he was fighting Indra for the position of heaven. But Indra was interested in heavenly pleasures. Vritrasur was interested in devotional service. So even though he was going to lose this battle, still he did not mind. Because he thought, let me fight because it is my duty. I know I will die because Indra has been blessed by Krishna with the weapon, Vajra, and blessed by Krishna personally that he must win this battle. So it doesn't matter to me if I lose the battle, but I will win the war if at the end of the battle I remember Krishna, and therefore by the Lord's mercy I go back. So he says in that prayer, Nanaka prishtam, nacha parameshtam. He says, my dear Lord, I am not interested in becoming ruler of Dhruvaloka. I am not interested in becoming ruler of the heavenly planets. I don't want to be ruler of earth, neither do I want to be ruler of the lower planets. Frankly speaking, even all the yogic powers of the world, they do not interest me. And I don't even want liberation from this cycle of birth and death. The only thing is, I only want an opportunity to always remember your lotus feet. And if I cannot get that opportunity to remember your lotus feet in all these other situations, then I don't want them. This is a very safe way to continue our devotional service. A very practical way. We don't want anything if it makes us forget Krishna. But we want everything if it allows us to remember Krishna. So Vritrasur was in a tragic situation. He's about to die. 6th canto, 11th chapter, he's already hurt. By the 12th chapter, his hands are actually cut off. Yeah, they actually hit with Vajra by Indra, and he's gone. But it doesn't matter to him, because he says, Krishna, every opportunity to remember you, that is you. So when we have an opportunity, a window to remember Krishna, that window is Krishna. It's not different from Krishna. Parikshit Maharaj felt the same way. The situation now of Shringi cursing Parikshit Maharaj was created by Krishna. In Mahabharata, you remember the character known as Ghatotkacha? Right? Ghatotkacha was a very powerful half demon and half Pandava, because his father was who? Bhima. And his mother was the Rakshasi, right? Hidimba? Yeah, Hidimbi. Brother was Hidimba, right? Yeah. So Bhima married her, and from that union came Ghatotkacha. And when Ghatotkacha was born, he was unique. He had the powers of the Asuras, but he also had the divine qualities of the Pandavas. So when the Mahabharata war started, the Mahabharata war was a terrible war, but Ghatotkacha was very powerful. And he was so powerful because he had sorcery and he had the strength of the Pandavas. So the battle came to a point where it was critical that something be done to stop Ghatotkacha. And the problem was, who could do it? And the Kauravas realized that there was only one weapon that could slay him, and that was the weapon of Shakti, and that belonged to Karna. But Karna had reserved that weapon for only one person, and that was Arjuna. So when the Kaurava army came to him and said, Karna, you have to unleash the weapon, otherwise Ghatotkacha will kill us all. He said, no, this one has Arjuna's name on it. I'm not going to get this involved with any other person. But they said, you won't even be able to come to Arjuna, because by then you would have been killed also. That's how bad Ghatotkacha is. So please use it, please use it. Now Karna was determined not to. Have you been in a situation where you are determined not to do something, but somehow the situation turns out that you do it? How many times we have been compelled and impelled while we say, no, I'll never do it, but you do it? It happens all the time. This is a proof that we think we are in control, but there is a higher force controlling us. So Karna was not devotee really. So he thought Shakti would be used for Arjuna. So his mood was offensive towards a devotee. So Krishna gave him nice powers of not remembrance, but the power to forget his will, not to use the Shakti. So Krishna from within instigates Karna to finally give in to the demands of the Kauravas. And finally he says, all right, I will use the Shakti. So just before nightfall, as the sun is setting, Ghatotkacha becomes very powerful. And at that point of time, Karna uses the Shakti weapon. And it hits Ghatotkacha and he dies. But before he dies, he grows very big and he falls onto half the Kaurava army and he finishes them off. So actually a lot of people died that night. And in the Pandava camp, everyone was weeping for Ghatotkacha. But Krishna was smiling. And Arjuna went up to him, and said, Krishna, if you don't mind me saying, everyone is tragically, they are feeling this tragedy. And we find it very bad. I don't know why you are smiling, Krishna. There's nothing to smile. Such a great person has died. And Krishna said, the reason why Ghatotkacha was actually born was for this day, my dear Arjuna. That was the purpose of his birth. The opportunity for him to go back to Godhead was actually that he would give his life so that you will continue in the Mahabharata war. Because it is my will that you will finish this victorious. And then Arjuna understood that every opportunity someone gets, whether with life or with limb or anything else, if it's created by Krishna and if we take full advantage of it, then we are completely protected and directed by Rishikesha. And that is why Ghatotkacha attained liberation on the field. Not only because of the fact that, he was there and everyone else attained liberation, but Mahabharata tells us that his liberation was the liberation of the Vaikuntha planets. And that's a very important point. And this proves to us that situations are always created by Krishna. Don't blame people because situations are created. No, we should see the hand of Krishna. By blaming people and blaming circumstances, we lose time again. Parikshit Maharaj didn't lose time. And a quality of devotees, he doesn't waste a single moment. So that is why we must always remember two things in Shastras. A situation is created by Samanjas, the Lord, source of the opportunity. However, Bhagavatam tells us the renunciation when that situation comes is very much our choice. Parikshit Maharaj renounced the world when he could have lasted 7 more days in total material sense enjoyment. He decided, let's renounce that. Why? For a higher cause. And that is very, very important. When we use the word renunciation, in the material world, when they see devotees, they think you all have renounced because you're big losers. It's because you're running away from the material world. But Prabhupada says very clearly that the word renunciation itself implies that you have a proclivity, an inclination for a higher taste. We renounce something lower to get something higher. But in material world, very often renunciation is seen as settling for something less. But Parikshit Maharaj left his society, his kingdom, his family, everything for a higher cause. Because he knew now that the real purpose of life was to finally serve Krishna and to go back to Godhead and to hear Bhagavatam. So the renunciation is very much our decision. But situations favorable for renunciation, Krishna is creating all the time. But the moment a devotee takes it, he advances. If he loses the opportunity, he cannot blame anyone except himself. So that is why, even in Damodar Leela, if you notice, Yashoda Mata tried very hard to tie Krishna, and every time she tried to tie him and bind him with the ropes, it was always 2 inches short. And the 2 inches, Shastras tell us, they represent 2 very important components of our devotional service. One is the mercy of the Lord. The other is the sincere endeavor of the devotee. That sincere endeavor of the devotee is always seen in how much he is willing to renounce something in favor of a higher taste. That is ultimately the definition of renunciation. And that is what Parikshit Maharaj did. So renunciation, Prabhupada writes here, is giving up the attachment of worldly relations. And worldly relations doesn't mean today we all go back home and we renounce our families. You know, that'll be the end of everything. But we don't have to. The important thing is we have to change our consciousness. Instead of thinking that all these worldly relations and worldly properties belong to us, we should understand that all these things are not our property. That is the first step in renunciation, genuine renunciation. Otherwise what happens is, when we come to devotional service, we carry that baggage also. We say, I've given up my wife, my family and everyone, I've come to Krishna consciousness. And then we start our programs and we control everybody. We control and control and control. We want you to be this way, we want you to be that way. You have to come here, you have to come there. And in that way, we also develop the same mode of being attached. But we are attached to now a different set of things. We are attached to the fact that, oh, this is my program. We are attached to the fact that, oh, I'm running this. Or we are attached to the fact that, oh, these are my deities. But nothing belongs to us. Everything is on borrowed time. We are ourselves on borrowed time. So how can deities be ours? They can't be. The deities are never ours. We are theirs, but they are not ours. The deities are never our property, and we are here to serve them. The same way, we are here to serve those whom Krishna has selected as our family members. Our parents were not our selections. They were all selected to us, given to us by Krishna. When you were in the womb, you could not select, oh, choice A, choice B, choice C. No, you can't. Maybe wife and husband you can select. But even then, very often it happens that someone you want, you don't get. Someone suddenly comes, hey, I've got married to the person. It happens. Sometimes you say, oh, this is the person for me. After 1 year, 2 years, when honeymoon period is over, then you start thinking, actually, this is not the right person. What do I do? And when your wife has conceived or wife has conceived, you can't choose now, now I want this child. I want child to be that way. Whatever that comes, you have to accept. So actually, what are we in control of? Nothing. We can't even control our heartbeat. We can't control anything. We think we are controlling. So this is where Prabhupada means that when one gives up the attachment to worldly relations, then he becomes firmly fixed to Krishna. Parikshit Maharaj had the perfect attitude that his kingdom, his wife, his children, they were never his to begin with. They were always his to serve. And that is the mood of a devotee. When we understand that we are here to serve, then if you are a leader of a yatra, you will always be a servant. When you are a leader in your house, you will be humble. When you are a leader anywhere, at work, wherever, you'll always take the position of a servant. Because service is our true constitutional position. Leadership is only Krishna's domain. It is not anybody else's domain. That is why Parikshit Maharaj could very easily drop everything. And he had much more than you and I in terms of material acquisition. So that is why when a devotee understands that, then he has renounced genuinely. Otherwise, no matter how much we make a show of renunciation, it will remain a show. Because the moment something is not in alignment with what we want, we'll become disturbed. Tato anyata kinchana yad vivekshataha pritat drishashtat krita rupa namabihi na karhichit kwapicha dushtita matihi labet vata natanahu ivaspadam. Very important verse. Labet vata hatanahu ivaspadam. A boat in the water which is not anchored to land, what happens to that boat? Bhagavatam tells us the boat will just drift away. This is the first canto, 5th chapter, I think 14th verse, 1.5.14. Very important verse. So there Narada Muni is advising Vyas Bhagwan. My dear Vyas Bhagwan, you are disturbed. Because Vyas Bhagwan was disturbed. Can you imagine? If he is disturbed, what about us? He had compiled the Vedas, he had done the Puranas, the Itihasas, everything. He was more spiritual than we can ever dream to be. But even then he was not satisfied. So where is our chance? And when Narada Muni comes, he says, Vyas Bhagwan, you've done everything. And by the way, you're also the literary incarnation of the Lord. But I detect you are still dissatisfied. So Vyas Bhagwan says, I don't understand, but there must be a reason. So before Narada Muni comes, he discerns the reason. He says, there's only one reason why I'm still dissatisfied. I have not spent my time in glorification of Krishna. Full stop. And when Narada Muni comes, he says 1.5.14. And in 1.5.14 he says, anything that you desire to describe, which is separate from the vision of the Lord, will simply react with different name, forms and results to agitate the mind. If you forget any other verse, you please remember this verse. Because this is the verse that tells us why we are agitated, even though we are in devotional service. Because somewhere along the line, our vision and his vision are not in alignment. Don't mistake me. We shouldn't tell Krishna, your vision has to be more to the right. Because I'm more to the right. You know, little bit here, little bit there. No, it's the other way around. We have to come in line with Krishna. Sadhu, Sastra and Guru. If we are in line with these three markers, then we are in line with Krishna. If we are not in line with these three markers, then the result of it is very simple. We will be agitated. So the next time you become agitated or I become agitated, don't blame anyone. Remember 1.5.14. Because 14 tells us clearly, go back home, do your homework. Something that we are doing is not in line with Guru, Sastra and Sadhu. And therefore it's not in line with Krishna. We have forgotten to glorify Krishna. Most likely we have glorified ourselves. And that is the reason why we are disturbed. The moment there is some subtle pride in what we do and what we have achieved, then we are not glorifying Krishna. That is the reason. So it's very clear that if you want to renounce, because Prabhupada, Jai Shla Prabhupada ki, Jagannath Baladev Subramai ki, Jai. It's very clear from Bhagavatam that if we do not offer the results of what we have done for the pleasure of the Lord and the devotees, then we will become trapped. And then attachment is so strong that renunciation is a dream. It becomes a dream. So therefore, renunciation by itself has no much value. Because you go into a vacuum. Okay, I've renounced the world, now what? Okay, I'll get attached to something else. So therefore, as devotees, we have to ask ourselves, okay, I have created more free time, but what is the free time for? It should be to serve the devotees, do more Bhagavatam, attend all the Mangala Aartis, and become a better devotee. The moment we are able to do that, then the renunciation has value. Otherwise, it's just Markata Vairagya, monkey renunciation. Monkey see, monkey do. And this is not good. So don't make it fashionable that we are renounced, but make it count. That is very important. So that is the point that Prabhupada is saying. Krishna's mercy comes when a devotee is absorbed in worldly affairs and he forgets Krishna. And that is what happened here. Krishna creates a situation, Prabhupada writes here, he creates a situation where a devotee has to become indifferent to the material world. The word indifferent should not be mistaken for the word callousness. When devotees perform their material duties, they are not callous. We should never be negligent in the discharge of our duties. A Vaishnava is Daksha, he is expert. If only all of us have studied well. We have all done good degrees, and whatever that we have studied, if we use it for Krishna, then that knowledge that we have, it actually becomes completely spiritual. But in the mood of renunciation, we say, no, I don't want to do all this because it has no inherent value. Then we become careless. And that's how sometimes Vaishnavas bring a bad name to our society. Because our renunciation is so false. Krishna was never told Arjuna, now go to the cave. Arjuna told Krishna, Krishna, I want to renounce. Isn't it? In the beginning he said, Krishna, I'm going to retire, putting down my bow and arrow. I've tendered my resignation. Find me the cave, I'm going to sit down there, become Sadhu Baba. That's what he wanted. But Krishna told him, Krishna told Arjuna, I know you better. Because by your nature, you are meant to fight. We all have our natures, isn't it? No matter what you do, hang yourself upside down, your nature comes through. It comes true. Whatever you were before as a non-devotee, if you were a bit of the kind was a bit more fiery by nature, you realize when you come to Krishna consciousness, that fiery nature is also there. Except instead of firing materialists, you fire the devotees. It happens. It happens. So that nature doesn't leave us. I deliberately did not look at it. You realize before you became devotee, if your voice volume was very high, now everyone will look at Bhagavan. After you become devotee, so you will find, hey, now I can use my voice for Krishna. So high volume is there. It happens. It's louder.
It's okay.
That's the ecstasy, Prabhu. It becomes that. That's true. Some of you may know, my godbrother in Rajkot, Vaishnav Seva Prabhu. When Vaishnav Seva Prabhu speaks to you mildly, it's like he's shouting at you. The first time I met him and he spoke to me, I thought I'd insulted him. Because he was shouting at the top of his voice and I was just next to him. So I went up to my Guru Maharaj and said, Maharaj, why is he shouting at me? I said, don't worry, that's how he talks. That's who he is. But better he is who he is and you see him for who he is, then he couches and seems very sweet, but inside he's all feeling bad about you. Why to have that? Isn't it better we see devotees for who they are? What is the problem with that? In Bhagavatam, every devotee has a character of his own. Even in the highest reign of Vrindavan, you have two camps serving Krishna. They don't see eye to eye. Balramji himself, not Balram Prabhu, but Balramji himself, he had differences of opinion about which camp he was going to be. He had a soft spot for Duryodhan of all people. Try to make sense of that. But he had that. And he decided, his reasons for not getting involved in Mahabharata war were slightly different from that of Krishna. But there is difference. The important thing to understand in our spiritual life is the principle of unity in diversity. Our problem is we want everyone to be like us. And that's where we kill ourselves. But Prabhupada's view of unity in diversity is celebrate the diversity and you will enhance the unity. If you minimize the diversity, then you smash the unity. It's a very subtle point, but it requires spiritual maturity, good sadhana, and following Guru, Sadhu and Sastra. The vision of 1-5-14, that makes a devotee not agitated when he sees differences, even amidst unity. It's fine. So Parikshit Maharaj was like that. He did not find this situation to be something where he was callous. He did not become callous in his discharge of duties. Instead, Prabhupada uses the word, a devotee becomes indifferent. In other words, he leaves it to Krishna. The perfect example of that I can think of is Vidura. If you remember the story of Vidura, Vidura was always the good advisor to who? Dhritarashtra. Right? And he was always advising Dhritarashtra, do not take up the cause of Duryodhana. Otherwise you'll be finished. And every time he told this, he said this in front of Duryodhana. He never said this behind his back like a diplomat. He said it in front of him. And every time he did that, the temperature for Duryodhana will go higher and higher. Until one day, in the 3rd canto, 1st chapter, I think the 16th verse, it reaches boiling point. 3.1.16, it reaches boiling point. And Duryodhana then decides that take him out of this assembly. Duryodhana shouts and says, take this man out. He's an ungrateful dog. He calls Vidura that. He says, actually he's not even born of full royalty, because his mother is just a dasi. So he's actually dasi putra. He's nobody. And on top of that, he wants to advise my father, who is royalty. And he thinks he knows everything. But all this time he has been living off our food and living off our hospitality, living beautifully in his own palatial palace, and yet he's condemning us and he's keeping up our enemies, the Pandavas. So you do one thing, beat him. That's the other thing he says. Beat him to within a breath of his life air, and then cast him out. Throw him out of this palace and never let him come back again. These are the words of Duryodhana in the 3rd canto. Very powerful language. Not powerful in the good sense, very abusive language. Now when Vidura heard all this, how do you think he felt? He felt afflicted. He was hurt. Bhagavatam tells us that he was pierced by the arrows which he heard. These arrows of harsh words are more painful than the arrows that we shoot sometimes. And there is something devotees should be very careful of. Harshness, parusham. In Bhagavad Gita it is known as parusham. The harsh words should never be in the devotees' mouths. Truth may be unpalatable, but it doesn't mean that we cannot present it in a devotee fashion. That is very important. We can present truth as it is, but we don't have to present it harshly. This is also very important. Sometimes in the name of honesty, our tongue becomes a slaughterhouse and we hurt the people. And yet we have given up meat eating and we say, I have no propensity for violence. But the violence has become subtle. It has now become the tongue. And we use it. And then we couch it as, Prabhu, I'm just being honest. That's who I am. Accept me for who I am. There's a fine line between honesty and harshness. Even though they both start from H. But there's a fine line. So what did Vidura do? Vidura was pierced by the arrows that he heard in his ears. And Bhagavatam tells us, he decided that he was going to just put his bow and arrow down. Bhagavatam says he was afflicted to the core of his heart. If you read the translation, Vidura was hurt and afflicted to the core of his heart, but he was not sorry. Very important. Devotees, it's alright to be hurt. It's natural. We cannot say, I've renounced all hurting propensity, so I don't feel hurt when someone tells me something. Vidura felt hurt. He was deeply hurt. But Bhagavatam tells us he was not sorry. The problem sometimes with us, and that is a great barrier for devotion service, is when we start feeling really sorry for ourselves. And that becomes very difficult. Imagine if Parikshit Maharaj spent 7 days and 7 nights feeling sorry for himself. He would have died without hearing Bhagavatam. Because he would have spent 7 days and 7 nights. Oh, I need to see a counselor. I need to talk to a therapist. I need to come out of this and then I should read Bhagavatam. It won't happen. Bhagavatam is your therapist. Bhagavatam is your counselor. We don't need to go anywhere else, do anything else. But very often, devotees, we get stuck when we're struggling. We get stuck with a sense of self-pity. And we say, see, I'm the victim here. Everyone else is doing this, but they don't realize, I feel exploited, I feel victimized. By the time you finish and you're through with all this, Bhagavatam is also gone. Your life air is also gone. Why to waste the time? The Vidura did not waste his time. He was afflicted, but he was not sorry. Because he considered the acts of the external energy of the Lord to be supreme. That's how the verse ends. He considered the acts of Krishna, the hand of Krishna, to be supreme. So he walked out, leaving his bow and arrow. And he used that time to go on yatra. And in that yatra, he saw Maitreya Rishi. And then he sat down and he spent wonderful time with him. And the entire bits of 3rd canto is full of Vidura's talks with Maitreya. Now Vidura would not be able to give us Maitreya's nectar if not for the fact that he felt hurt but not sorry. And he decided, let's leave this palace and let me go out and let me spend time increasing my own Krishna consciousness. And that is the mood of a devotee. Parikshit Maharaj did not waste time. He did not feel sorry for himself. So feeling sorry for yourself is never going to help us. It is a material sentiment. Rather, channel it usefully. Turn it around. Increase our chanting. Increase our activities of serving the devotees. It's very important. When a devotee hurts you, what is the best thing we can do? We serve them more. That's all. You keep serving a devotee who hurts you, and after a while his heart will just melt. And then it becomes very pleasing. That is very important. We should understand this. Then we become peaceful. Otherwise, what happens as struggling devotees is, the moment someone hurts us, that's it. Close the door. You have your own world, I have my own world. That's enough. This is not devotional service. This is material service in the guise of devotional service. And then we become agitated. We complain, my devotional service is not increasing. Why? Because we don't see how we are behaving. We don't see how we are causing agitation to others. Vidura did not cause agitation to Dhritarashtra. He left, increased his devotional service, and finally when he heard his brother was going to leave this world and renounce, what did he do? He came back. He walked into that same house that he was thrown out. He didn't feel a sense of pride. I'm not going to come back unless I get an open invitation from my brother, and then I will come back. We feel that way, right? Until devotee invites us, because I got hurt, I'm not going to come for this program. Why should I come? This is all silly. We are losing. This is how we get agitated. Vidura said, no, I'm going back. My brother is in need, and I have love for him. This is genuine love. Not he was renounced, but he was very much in love with his brother. Because that love was on the platform of service. So he goes back and he speaks Bhagavatam. And when he speaks Bhagavatam, he says a very important point on renunciation that this purport is about. In the first canto, 13th chapter, I think it's in the 17th or 18th verse, he tells Vidura, Vidura, remember one thing. Evam graheshu santanam.
Tells Dhritarashtra.
Right? Pramatanam tadihaya. Right?
Tells Dhritarashtra.
He tells, Vidura tells Dhritarashtra, my dear brother, evam graheshu sattanam. And then he says, pramatanam tadihaya. Pramatanam means you get mad. Then he says, atyakramat avinyataha kalaha paramadushtaraha. Very important verse. He says, my dear brother, please remember one thing about time. Time is imperceptible. You can't sense when it is going, but it is going very fast. It's already 8:15. I don't have much time. It's going to end. And not only is time imperceptible, it is also insurmountable. You cannot surmount time. No one can come out of time. We all have to move in this canvas of time, as long as we are in the material world. But in spiritual world, there's no concept of time, because everything is eternal. But here, time runs us. So he says, remember these two things. This is the way to renounce. And then he says, time has this quality of atyakramat avinyataha. Atyakramat means overtaking. If you read the word to word, atyakramat means overtaking. You're a car driving on a highway. You're a driver in a car driving on a highway. And all of a sudden a car comes from nowhere and it just cuts you and it goes. Have you had that feeling before? You don't know where it came from. It just cuts you and goes. That is the force of time. Time is so powerful. Before you know it, before you say, I have time to read Bhagavatam, tomorrow you die. Oh, one day I'll wake up for Mangalarti. But the day never comes. One day I will start becoming a devotee. It never comes. I know a devotee in Singapore who told me, Prabhu, I have a life plan, like 5-year, 10-year plan. My plan for my devotional service is, in this life I will chant 4 rounds. In the next life I will chant 8 rounds. In the third life I'll chant 8 plus 4, 12. And I'll take 4 lives. Mine is a 4-life plan. I hope in 4 lives I will achieve 16 rounds. That's a good plan. Except that we are just thinking that our next life will be a human life. And we will not be animals. And that's a big, big leap of faith. And this is how we make all these plans which really have no value. And that's how the car overtakes us before we can finish with our plans, and we are finished. Death will overtake us. And you know the quality of death. The quality of death is yamasya karuna nasti. Na asti karuna. Death has no mercy. It doesn't wait for you to take a bath and then you will die. No. You may be halfway through your bath, and if your time is coming, Yamaraj will say, whatever condition you are, I'll accept you. He's very accepting. Yamaraj is very cross-hearted. Doesn't matter. You're upside down now. When your time is up, come on. That's it. That is Yamaraj. So this is the thing we don't realize. So Vidura, in true renunciation, Vidura in true renunciation tells Dhritarashtra that you please remember that genuine renunciation means our time is going. And therefore, before it kalaha parama dushtaraha, before it destroys you, you please do not be sorry for yourself, but you please take this process. And Dhritarashtra, on the force of the instruction of Vidura and his association, he leaves everything. And finally, in the forest, he self-immolates himself. And in that way, at least he cuts the cycle of birth and death. Dhritarashtra was a no-hoper, so to speak, at the beginning of Mahabharata. But by the force of association and the mercy of a devotee, which is the mercy of the Lord, he at least achieved the cut from the cycle of birth and death. How much more we have been given by Srila Prabhupada. How much more facility we have. So that is why when one becomes genuinely renounced, a devotee understands the signal of the Lord. You see, Prabhupada writes here, a devotee can see and understand the signal of the Lord. And what is that signal? He understands when a situation is awkward, when you are put in an awkward situation in life, that situation is nothing but Krishna. How many of us have been in an awkward situation in life? In fact, all of us at some point. Awkward can come in so many different forms, isn't it? It can come in embarrassing forms, which teaches us that life is really a material embarrassment. Or sometimes it can come in a situation where it's so awkward, I don't know what to do. I'm placed in a situation where I have no choice but to do something I don't want to do. Why is this happening to me? When that happens, a struggling devotee becomes disturbed, he becomes frustrated, he becomes unfavorable to devotional service. He becomes discouraged. But a pure devotee, the Viduras and the Vibhishanas, the Sudamas, the Gajendras, they turn it as a point of advantage. I'm in fear, better I turn to Krishna. And that's what Parikshit Maharaj says now. Towards the end of these verses in the 19th chapter, he sings very beautifully. Tasyeva meghasya paravaresho vyasakta chittasya graheshu abhikshnam nirveda rupo dvijasa niveda. What is that verse? Nirveda mulo dvijasa parupo. Sapa means snake. And then he ends by saying, Yatha prasakto bhayama shudatte. This verse is very important. It's in the first canto, 19th chapter, I think around 14th or 15th verse. And the translation is beautiful. The translation covers this entire purport. And this is the prayer of Parikshit Maharaj. He says, Krishna, he is the controller of the birth, of both the transcendental as well as the mundane worlds. This is very important. Krishna controls both matter and spirit. We always think Krishna controls spirit, but we also forget that Krishna also controls matter. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattaha sarvam pravartate. He is the origin of material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from him. So material things also are coming from Krishna. They don't belong to us. So that's the point Parikshit Maharaj is saying. Krishna, you are the controller of the material and the mundane worlds. But you have graciously overtaken me in the form of a Brahmana's curse. See, he does not see Shringi, he sees Krishna. Whereas all of us see a Brahmana curse, he sees Krishna. He says, you have graciously overtaken me. Atyakramat, remember the point of Atyakramat? Again it's used. He says, Krishna, you have overtaken me. Because I was just running away with material attachment. You caught up with me, you overtook me, you stopped me, and how did you stop me? You stopped me with a Brahmana's curse. This is the way we should see the calamities of life. We see Krishna. And then after saying that, he says, due to my being so attached to this world, to my life, to my family, to my kingdom, in order to save me, you have appeared before me in such a way that I become fearful, because only out of fear will I detach myself from this world. So fear for a devotee is not detrimental. Do you know that the whole three worlds, fear is present? Even the Devatas, they live in fear. Their fear is, oh, when will one demon come and take over kingdom? When Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha were born, Jai Vijay, as they fell, before they became Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, even as they were falling, the omens were bad. And Bhagavatam tells us the Devatas were becoming troubled. They were troubled. Not because they were going to be facing demons, but because they were going to lose something. Very often, it's not the demons that trouble us. It's what is going to be taken from us that really troubles us. So they were afraid that Swargaloka is going to go. So they all run to Brahmaji and say, Brahma, we are very disturbed. Brahma said, why are you disturbed? They said, look, they are falling. Brahma said, they are falling, but it's going to take time for them to grow. In the meantime, you still have your Swargaloka. But they were still fearful, because they thought, now we are going to lose. So Brahmaji, in the last verse of the 3rd canto, 16th chapter, he says that most ancient Lord alone will come to our rescue. What purpose can we serve on His behalf by deliberating on the subject? Repeat that. What purpose?
What purpose
can we serve?
Can we serve
on His behalf?
On His behalf
by deliberating on the subject?
On the subject.
We should put it up somewhere very big. The next time we become disturbed by some material element, ask yourself, what purpose can we serve?
Can we serve
On His behalf?
On His behalf.
By deliberating on the subject.
on the subject.
In other words, deliberating on subjects is not going to help us, because He has arranged. He is Krishna. He has created this situation. He summons us. Better we accept it. And that was what Brahmaji was saying. Your deliberation over this is not going to help. Better you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And in that way you won't become disturbed. Parikshit Maharaj saw, I've been cursed. So his mind was naturally disturbed. But what did he do? He said, no, it's Krishna. So what should I do? Go and find Shukadeva Goswami. Sit down and hear Bhagavatam. So 7 days, 7 nights, he never gave himself any chance. Why? Because he said, Krishna, you're so kind. You knew I will never leave everything. I will just leave this world by being a king. Very often when we have something very hard to retire, you notice that? Prabhupada says politicians never retire. They want to die in office very often. Either death is to remove them from office, or some scandal removes them from the office. Isn't it? But other than that, they don't want to leave. But they always talk about succession planning, and people are going to come, but it never happens finally. And sometimes we carry the same idea into our society too. As devotees, we say, okay, now I have this set up. I'm giving Bhagavatam. I'm taking the class. So for the rest of my life, I'm supposed to take the class. Isn't it my duty now to train other devotees and they take the class so that I can hear and I can also benefit? But it's very hard to leave our positions. Very hard. Once you become yatra leaders, that's it. You're a yatra leader for life. That means nobody else can have a yatra, nobody else can become a leader. This is also a problem. And this is how we catch ourselves in Maya. Even though we think we are in devotee. Close. This is the danger. Parikshit Maharaj, he was not caught by that. He was fearful. And therefore he said, now I am in fearful condition, so this fear is good for me. Do you know another devotee who feared very much, but Prabhupada says that fear was very good? It was Devaki, the mother of Krishna, the real mother of Krishna. When Devaki was giving birth to all her children, what was Kamsa doing? He was taking each one and killing them, right? So actually Devaki was always fearful of Kamsa. But Prabhupada writes in the purports of the beginning parts of the 10th canto, Kamsa actually represents material association. So every time Kamsa came and Devaki had to meet him, she was fearful. She was not fearful of losing the child, as much as she was fearful of the association of Kamsa. And Prabhupada says, a devotee should be fearful of material association. Because if he thinks that he can conquer material association, then he's foolish. Sometimes some devotees in the early days would go to pubs and then they would come and say, Prabhupada, we chanted to all the people there. And Prabhupada says, take it easy. They may make you become pub crawlers instead of you making them devotees. So this is the caution we should exercise. We should not think that we are above the powers of material association. We should be careful. This fear is the same fear that Parikshit Maharaj is speaking about. Not the fear of losing your property, but the fear of forgetting Krishna. So Devaki Mata feared Kamsa, and Prabhupada writes beautifully, every time Kamsa came and she was fearful, that fear made her remember Krishna more. And that purified her womb. And that is why every time Kamsa came and gave her association, she actually became more purified on the basis of fear. And that's why by the time Krishna came, her womb was so purified with her devotional mentality that it was prepared to receive the Lord. And this is how we should live in our lives. We should live our lives such a way never to take anything for granted. And in that way, we come to understand how valuable. In that way, our heart becomes purified. Then we can receive Krishna. So actually, Parikshit Maharaj was not disturbed. He saw it as an opportunity. And that is why a great devotee always behaves that way. So the conclusion to the verse is very nice. Because Prabhupada writes here that Srimad Bhagavatam would not have been spoken by Srila Shukadeva Goswami, the prime authority of Srimad Bhagavatam, if not for the fact of Parikshit Maharaj being put in difficulty. So a devotee embraces difficulty. He embraces challenge because it is an opportunity for him to remember Krishna. Prithu Maharaj wanted to complete his 100 Ashwamedha sacrifice. He was trying to do what we call a century, isn't it? Ashwamedha, 100. The only other personality in all three worlds who had done 100 was Indra. He was the champion, undisputed. And there was only one person coming close, and that was Prithu Maharaj. And when Indra saw that, he became disturbed. He thought, no, only I should own 100. And that is also a failing sometimes when we take up devotional service. Only I should be in this position. Only I am the one who should have this. It is not that. Devotional service is meant to be shared. Whatever we learn, we have to share. So this is very important. Mahaprabhu said every one of us has the responsibility to go out there and preach Krishna consciousness. And Mahaprabhu goes to the extent of saying, become a spiritual master and give Krishna consciousness to everyone. To that extent, Mahaprabhu is so humble. He is the original spiritual master. But he says everyone has that obligation spiritually. So in the same way, Prithu Maharaj was thinking, why is Indra being so selfish? I also can do 100. And he is none other than a partial incarnation of Krishna. So Indra became very tricky. He came in different disguises and stole the sacrificial horse after the 99th sacrifice. 4 or 5 times it happened. And every time he came in one disguise, he came as in the form of a renunciate. And that is why in this world we have all funny kinds of renunciations also, which are not really renunciation. They were all started by the good Devata Indra. And every time he came in one disguise, when Prithu Maharaj's son would try to stop him, he would see, hey, he's a sannyasi, how can I kill him? And then Indra would run away with the horse. And when it came to the 4th or 5th attempt, Prithu Maharaj got tired. And he drew the bow and arrow and he was ready to kill. When the Brahmanas who were performing the sacrifice said, Prithu, why do you have to get involved? We will with one mantra kill him. So they decided to stop their mantras here and they concentrated on Indra. They were going to chant a syllable to kill him when Brahmaji comes and says, it's good that you reminded Prithu Maharaj that the sacrifice is more important, but you have forgotten why you are here. You are not here to kill somebody and recite some syllable. You are also here for the sacrifice. It is a glorification of the Lord. Not counting number 99, number 100. This number games is a very dangerous thing. How many people are in your group? How many people are chanting 16 mala? Give me this report, give me that report. Statistically, we look good. But what about the heart? How do you define that? How do you put a number to that? You can't. Prabhupada didn't build this movement based on numbers. He built it based on love and devotion. You cannot value that by numbers. And that's what Brahmaji was trying to say. So Brahmaji finally turns around and he tells Prithu Maharaj, stop Prithu. And it's a beautiful verse, you know. Masmin Maharaj Krita Swachittam Nisham Mayasmad Rasa Adritatma Yadhyayato Daivahatam Nakartum Mano Tirushtam Ushate Tamo Andam. This is also in the 4th canto. I forget the actual verse, I can find it. But the translation is nice. He says, my dear king, please remember one thing. Do not be agitated and do not be anxious. 2 A's. Don't be agitated and don't be anxious. Because your sacrifice have not been properly finished. Don't. Sometimes we have a goal and we think we must reach it. But when we don't, we become frustrated. So Brahma's advice is to us. As devotees, don't give in to agitation, don't give in to anxiety. Kindly take my words with great respect. And now Brahmaji says, we should always remember that if something happens by providential arrangement, we should not be very sorry. In other words, you try to do something, but the result is the opposite. Don't be very sorry. Because Brahmaji says, the more we try to rectify such reversals, the more we enter into the darkest regions of materialistic thought, tamo andam. Because we are fighting Krishna's will. That is very important. If you try and try and try to achieve something, and every time you try, and especially if it's material, you find it just doesn't get the result you want, then please learn to accept it. Very important. Instead of wasting time, chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Ram Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Srila Gurudev ki
Jai.
Nitai Gaura Premanand.
Hare Bol.
Are there any questions? Yes, Prabhu.
So, Prabhuji, it was very nice to have this association with your association. So, yes, at the beginning you were talking about this morning, getting up early, the snoozing. How to get rid of that one, Prabhu? How to improve that? Any tips you can?
One practical tip is to somehow or another convince the mind that what happens if today was our last day, Prabhu? If today was our last day, you don't need an alarm clock, you'll wake up. You'll do Mangala Arati because you know that today is your last day. So a devotee should carefully think about the fact that it could be that today is our last day. The most wonderful thing in the world, Yudhishthira Maharaj was asked, what is the most wonderful thing? And he says, the most wonderful thing in the world is that every day someone is dying. Yet those who live, they think that they will live forever. And if you really think about it, it is the most wonderful thing in the world. Whenever we know people are dying, we never think that my turn may just come now. It's 50-50. Do we take a chance with 50-50 or do we err on the side of caution? So our intelligence must use this sastric knowledge that death comes any time. And on the strength of good chanting, good association, we should reflect on the last day of our death. That death is coming. And if we go to sleep praying very sincerely to Krishna, please Krishna, tomorrow morning I have a great desire to wake up so that I can serve you for Mangala Arati. Then Prabhu, the devotee's experience is that Krishna will somehow or another wake you up. In the 3rd canto, 25th chapter, Kapila Dev tells his mother that the soul has the capacity and the ability to go to sleep. We all can sleep very quickly. Actually, we can sleep faster than we can awake. Isn't it true? Awaking is a bit difficult. But sleeping, everybody is ready. Even now we are ready to sleep. You don't have to tell someone, Prabhu, I'm going to give you a very difficult task. What is it? Go to sleep. No, that's the easiest thing we can do actually. Especially when prasadam comes and our stomach is full, very easy to sleep. But my point is that the Kapila Dev says that while the soul allows the living entity to sleep, it is the super soul who allows the living entity to awake. That is a fact stated by Kapila Dev. And when the super soul doesn't allow you to wake up, that day you sleep. In other words, you die, Prabhu. You die. So actually the super soul is waking us every day. One who has that transcendental knowledge, then every time we go to sleep, or every time we put their lordships to sleep, our prayer should not be that, in the morning I'll wake you up, okay? See you then. No. Sometimes we always think, we are the pujari, so we have to wake up Krishna. If we don't wake up Krishna, how is he going to go about doing his duties? But that's wrong. The idea is, Krishna is already awake. He's never asleep. But the idea is, Krishna, now you're giving me an opportunity to put you to sleep. Please allow me next morning to wake up so that I can be allowed the opportunity to wake you up. In that mood, Krishna will wake us up. This is our personal experience. And if we are determined, then eventually, by Krishna's grace, by Guru's grace, by the grace of the devotees, we'll somehow wake up. For many years in Singapore, we had a variety of systems to wake each other. We'll call each other, we know, Sutta Prabhu, Raghuvandan Prabhu. We all have wake-up calls for each other, Of course, wake-up call means you can just put the phone down after, Prabhu, I'm awake, huh? Put it down. We've done that before also. We've all done that. But when a devotee calls you in the morning, you know it's out of love. Nothing else is the reason. He's saying, Prabhu, 3:30, wake up. Ah, yes, Prabhu. Then 10 minutes later, Prabhu, wake up. Oh, okay, fine, thank you. And after a while, we get the hang of it. So actually, it's helpful to help each other to wake up. It won't hurt. And if you all can gather anywhere where you are allowed to gather in terms of proximity and all for Mangalarti, that once a week, once in 2 weeks, coming together actually gives us more impetus to wake up every day also. It does. So Mangalarti, Prabhupada did not create Mangalarti out of a whim. He created it at the most awkward time known to man. 4:30 is a crazy time for everyone else except devotees. But he did it for a reason. And he was very particular that we attend Mangalarti. So we cannot say that we are working and therefore we can't wake up. No, if we had a project to finish and it was within the ambit of the work, we will wake up. But because, nobody's paying us to wake up for Mangalarti is difficult. I'm not advocating that we get into that system. But we should wake up out of love. So these are some ways, Prabhu, we can become determined. And it's very simple. Sorry, one point, Prabhu. Very often devotees say, I very little sleep. But it works two ways. If you try to be disciplined, you can go to sleep early. We find we really waste our time when we come back in the evenings. Even if you come back late at 9 o'clock, you don't have to sleep at midnight. You can be disciplined enough to sleep earlier if the object is to wake up for Mangalarti. And honestly, given our age as adults, we don't need more than 6 hours. 6 hours is a luxury. In fact, we should be able to get by with 4 or 5 hours. We won't die. And even if we die, we'll die in Mangalarti. What's the loss? Some people say, Prabhu, I'm going to die at this rate, I'll fall sick, I'll die. I remember my Guru Maharaj always saying, Prabhu, if you die during Mangalarti, Krishna will be very happy. That's the whole point. Someone, he was going to jail, Prabhu, he was a devotee. And he was going to be jailed for some really unfortunate event, And he came to my Guru Maharaj in Singapore and he said, Prabhu, Maharaj, I'm going to be in jail. And Maharaj, he was so cool. He said, do you know what? Our movement is based on remembering Krishna. And Krishna is very auspicious. He was born in the jail, man. So it's alright, you go to jail. It's okay, you come back. He expected Maharaj to say, I'm going to pray for you. You poor thing. Maharaj said, no, it's very nice. Krishna went to jail. He was born in jail. So you just go to jail and come back. So it's not that we can't do something. But it's our attitude, prabhuji. We won't die with a bit of sleep, We wasted so many lives sleeping anyway. Why not give the sleep for Krishna now? We won't die. Brajwala Prabhu, you had a question.
Prabhu, two questions. One, the verse that we repeated, where is that in the Bhagavatam?
It's in the line in the purport?
Yeah.
It's the 3rd canto, 16th chapter. It's the last verse, Prabhu. And it's in the purport. The last line of the purport, I think. Oh no, the last line of the verse. Yes. 3rd canto, 16th chapter, last verse.
Ask for a question.
Sure, Prabhu.
I've sat through meetings in ISKCON where the main metric of how well a program is doing by how many new devotees you're making, as measured by the metric of how many people are chanting 16 minutes.
Yes.
So I agree with what you're saying, that I don't think whether someone's chanting 16 rounds is necessarily a reflection of their spiritual progress or a reflection of a healthy community, necessarily. So that my question is, did your guru ever give any statements to you or teachings on how we can tell if somebody's progressing, or how do we measure how our community is advancing? Just something broad like that.
That's a very nice point.
Well, that person can jam out 16 rounds. Well,
yes.
I can do iJop all day on my iPhone,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I'm doing anything, you know.
That's true. I think the real measure, from what I understand from Guru Maharaj and from whatever I've read and understood from Prabhupada and his time spent with the devotees, is that ultimately our sadhana, if it's yielding sincerity, will translate into nice Vaishnava behavior. And that Vaishnava behavior will translate into loving dealings and tolerance amongst devotees. And it will also become a platform for inspiring each other. So a congregation that works very well together despite differences, where you have devotees trying very hard to reach out to each other, where a devotee's behavior is so reflective of his sadhana, then you know the congregation is actually growing very nicely. So actually Bhagavatam equals to behavior. All the shlokas that we learn and all the sadhana that we do must translate into practical behavior. If it doesn't translate into practical behavior, there's a huge disconnect between what we are thinking we're doing and, like you said, doing it as a ritual. In fact, what you say is in Sastra. Because in Madhya Leela, 12th chapter, I think it's the 35th or 36th verse, there is that episode where Mahaprabhu has washed the Gundicha temple. He's done it one round, and all the dirt that was visible in the first round he had thrown out. But now he went into the temple again and he told the devotees, let's clean it a second time. And some of the devotees were thinking, we've cleaned it. But Mahaprabhu wanted to clean the subtle dirt in our heart. So he went inside the temple and he gathered all the fine dust. And he gathered it with his upper cloth. And Prabhupada writes a very long purport there. And in that purport, Prabhupada says very nicely that when devotees perform devotional service, but if we still have subtle desires for fruitive activities, then it's very easy for that devotional service to appear devotional, but in our hearts we continue to have all these material desires that we want to get through the platform of devotional service. And Prabhupada lists 5 or 6 symptoms, and these are symptoms that as practicing devotees we have to be very careful of. The first symptom of a devotee who is actually in what we call a neophyte stage, where his chanting is doing everything but he's not spiritually mature, is kutinati. In other words, he will find fault. Fault finding is one very strong indication that we can chant, we can do everything. Ramchandra Puri was the disciple of Madhavendra Puri. He was very pakka with sastric law, very good with sadhana, but he was always criticizing even his spiritual master. So eventually all that sadhana didn't help him because he didn't translate it into humility and behavior. So fault finding kills us. The second thing I remember in that verse is pratishtasa. Pratishtasa. Pratishtasa means the desire for name, fame and high position. There will be another symptom of an immature devotional community. When we run after name, fame and position. When that's more important than loving dealings, tolerance and helping each other, that becomes dangerous. The third one, if I remember correctly, is Jiva Himsa. Jiva Himsa means envy of other living entities. As a devotee, the last thing we should have in our heart is when someone is doing very nicely and we are envious of it. Of course, outwardly we say, Prabhu, you give a nice class. But in our heart we say, actually my class is better than his. So that's envy. And that may come even if you chant very well, because your chanting is offensive by nature. So that's dangerous sometimes. The fourth point, if I remember correctly, is ni shid achara. Accepting things which are forbidden by scripture. Bhagavatam tells us how to behave. We behave in the opposite way. Then we claim it to be devotional. That is actually going to destroy our devotional service. And then...
Can you give an example for that?
Okay, fine. For example, Shastras tell us that we should... Okay, maybe sadhu, Prabhupada. Prabhupada has told us very clearly that Mangalarti is very important. He has told us that 16 rounds of chanting is very important. But sometimes what we do is, we don't want to accept that. Because we say our way is different. Our lifestyle is different from the time of Prabhupada. So therefore, we make those adjustments in our head and we just do anything that we want and we substitute other things. So this is not already recommended by the scripture. It's actually forbidden, but we do it. Bhagavatam is clearly stated by Bhagavatam that we only need Bhagavatam, we don't need any other scripture. In the second verse of the first canto, first chapter, it's very clearly stated by Shukadev Goswami that there's no need for any other scripture. But supposing we say, no, I need to find out all the other obscure scriptures. Now that's forbidden. It's not necessary. In fact, our acharyas say this is all that's needed. And then we do something which is not needed based on our speculation. That is Nishidachara. Is that helpful, Madhya?
Yes.
Then the other one, the last two I remember are karma. Karma is desire for material gain through devotion service. We want some prestige, some fame. We've given up everything else, but we want these things. But we want it through this. And the last, if memory serves me right, is puja. Puja means hankering for popularity. We feel that our devotional service and progress is judged by how popular we are. Everyone loves me, therefore I'm a great devotee. Where's the logic in that? There's no logic. So Prabhupada lists this very carefully in that purport, Prabhu. And he says that these are the subtle anarthas, unwanted desires that will come in our heart when we don't execute devotional service carefully. When we make it statistical, this is the danger. So these are actually good markers for us in any community to be watchful. As leaders, to be watchful of this, and as individual devotees, to be self-reflective. We should not walk around saying, hey, this 6, oh, you have puja, you have this, you have that. No. But we should actually reflect on ourselves. Do I have this tendency? Is that why I'm disturbed? Is that why I'm agitated? So I hope that helps. Yes, Atma Prabhu.
I have 3 questions. If that's too many, that's okay.
Okay, I'll try and keep them all short.
All right. First question was in regards to one of the main points in the purport where the pure devotee, Krishna may arrange an awkward situation for the pure devotee, but it's not because they're contaminated by material nature, so we shouldn't judge them as such.
Yes.
So I was thinking, it's obviously in one sense a level easier to not judge Maharaj Parikshit because back then he's not affecting my life in any way.
Yes.
But when it comes to dealing with senior devotees, I've seen, in my mind, over the history of the movement, a couple mistakes. One is a senior devotee makes some kind of mistake I don't like, so we reject him completely.
Yes.
And the other is somehow there's been times where devotees have gone actually off kilter, but people attach themselves, they kind of keep with that because they start justifying like that. Well, he's an advanced devotee, so it must be some meaning behind it,
Yes.
and then you get way over here.
Yes.
So in real life, how do you judge which one you're doing, if you're doing that?
The best way to judge which one you're doing is to take your back and your stretching mind.
I see.
But if you take a sadhu, that's why you have guru, sadhu and sastra. Because guru is an entity, sadhu is an entity, and they are both mutually exclusive in one sense. So if you take a personality who's out of that, and if you sit down with them and you hear them, then chances are, by consulting Vaishnavas, they will give you the understanding. If you chant very nicely, Prabhu, and you pray to Krishna very hard, and if you follow the instructions of your spiritual master, if he's present through his words and instructions, they will definitely help to clear that problem. So very often I'd say first line of defense, go to spiritual master. If spiritual master is not physically present, hear his lectures, hear his instructions. Speak to his disciples who have heard him, who have served him, and from there he will speak to you. And you can speak to all other spiritual masters also. There are many advanced devotees in our movement. That's the beauty of our movement. We have many advanced devotees. Our problem is sometimes we don't see that because no one can really understand sometimes the workings of a Vaishnava. And sometimes through a variety of material inabilities, we cannot see that. So a short and sharp way is consult. Always consult. Through consulting, revealing your mind, many things which appear wrong or inaccurate can become actually very much clarified. But if we don't, Prabhu, then we'll go into the realm of speculation. First question.
Second question was in regards to Maharaj Parikshit, how he didn't counter, he got cursed, he didn't counter curse, he accepted it as Krishna's situation. But then you have the other story around there where when he was dealing with his kingdom, as soon as Kali came in, he didn't accept that as Krishna's mercy. He had a strict hand So it seems like it's another interplay, like of if I'm in a taking care of something, it's like a different approach to accepting Krishna's will than if it's for myself personally. Is that sort of the thing? Or?
Because in the 17th chapter before this, when Kali comes, or before that too, when Kali comes and he doesn't accept that, he tries to stop Kali, it's because it was his dharma to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Guru Maharaj answering this question. It was his dharma to do so. So therefore he had to execute it first. And then he had to leave the results of that to Krishna. Which is why when he came down from the chariot and he saw Kali actually torturing the bull and the cow, his first duty was to punish. He had to do that first. But then when the cow and the bull turned around and said, who do we punish? Who's the perpetrator? Actually, we're not sure who's the real culprit here. So that's when he could understand this is Krishna's hand. But he had to do what he had to do. And so he had to banish Kali. So Arjuna didn't like doing what he had to do on the battlefield. He took an opposite reaction. He started first by saying, I will not do my duty. But then Krishna goes on with the Gita to say, why, despite you liking or not liking it, you still have to do it. But the results of what come, that you must leave to Krishna. So actually Parikshit Maharaj acted in consonance with that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Third question.
In terms of the distinction between honesty and harshness, because I remember reading that section of Mahabharata where Vidura was explaining to Dhritarashtra, and really speaking, like, if you were in Dhritarashtra's shoes, that wasn't it wasn't very polite speech,
No,
it was pretty harsh.
Yeah, it was
so,
not.
But we consider Vidura being honest and Duryodhana being harsh. So is the distinction just where they're coming from, or what's the distinction?
The distinction is, in the heart of Vidura, his motive was to serve Dhritarashtra. In the heart of Duryodhana, his motive was to destroy Vidura.
So then when someone's speaking to us,
Yes.
because we shouldn't judge, but we do.
Yeah.
So our judgment should look beyond just the physical or impact of what someone's saying and see where is it coming from in order to figure out.
It will work in two ways.
Sure.
Purity is the force. So if someone has pure motive, you'll find that even if he fires you upside down, you'll just be thinking, how come I'm accepting his instructions very nicely? Many of our spiritual masters have done that to us at some point. Prabhupada did that with his disciples sometimes. It was very heavy. But many of his disciples tell us, we just accepted it when Prabhupada said it, because purity is the force. So that's one. A devotee who's really pure in intention, he gets the message through. Even if you resist it, at some point, it'll get through. The other way of doing it is from our end, our responsibility. We should be open enough to not blanket a devotee by saying that, okay, he's telling me all these things, there is a motive for it. Rather, we should say, he's telling me these things, I see the hand of Krishna in this. Let me reflect on it. The moment you do that, Prabhu, your heart is open. And then the devotee is not a foe or a friend, but he's actually sent by Krishna. A devotee who accepts that attitude, he's actually free. He doesn't get into a personal problem or an ego issue. He just sees this is Krishna's hand. Just like Parikshit Maharaj did not fight with Shringi because it was Krishna's hand. He made a mistake with Shamika, and like a true devotee, he accepted it. He was remorseful. So a devotee does that very often. I hope that helps. Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Thank you very much for being a very patient and tolerant audience. And I want to thank Jayant Prabhu and Mataji. Thank you for having us over. Very good.
Thanks for coming, Prabhu.
No, thank you. So I'm sure you all will be very, very hungry. So
Grace Devakinandan Prabhu Ki
Jai. Jai Shri Prabhupada, Shri Gurudev Ki Jai. So should we chant 5 minutes or should we call it quits? Chanting? Fine. So let's chant the holy names of the Lord. How many of you are bathroom singers? Yeah, I'm sure we're all bathroom singers at some point. So we should sing as loudly as possible for the pleasure of Krishna. That's very important. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna